Welcome to Season 2 of the Caregivers podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Ropeleski, and you can call me Dr. Mark. If you're listening today, there's a good chance you want this year, 2026, to feel different. Not louder, not busier, not more productive, because you already are, but just more yours. Caregivers don't usually need more motivation. You already show up and keep showing up. You already give. You already carry more than most people ever see. What you don't need is another list, not even a self-care list that quietly becomes another obligation. What you need is some clarity, some direction, and permission to stop scattering your energy. Today we're going to do one thing together, and by the end of this episode, you'll have one essential focus for 2026, one 2-minute version of yourself that survives hard days, and one clear boundary that protects it. So why do caregivers' resolutions fade? Every January, caregivers make the same promise. This year will be different. This year I'll take care of myself. This year I'm going to slow down. For a moment it actually feels possible. But then life returns. The shift runs long. Someone deteriorates and you're late. A child gets sick. A parent needs help. A colleague asks for call coverage. Your inbox fills overnight. You're underslept because of your partner's chronic health condition. And without any dramatic failure, your resolution fades. Not because you quit, not because you lack discipline, but because caregiving doesn't happen on clean schedules or predictable energy. Caregivers live inside reactivity. Your nervous system is trained to respond, not to protect margins. It's trained to adapt, not to defend boundaries. Your nervous system is trained to say yes, often automatically. Before we go further, I want to be clear about where this perspective is coming from. I'm a physician who manages chronic GI disease. I work as a teacher of undergrad and postgrad students, and I've been a researcher and manager. I've spent years inside healthcare systems working with patients, families, and professionals who carry enormous responsibility with very little margin. I've watched carefully what caregiving asks of people, and I've watched what it quietly takes from them. I've seen burnout not because people don't care, but because they care constantly without protection. So when I say this next part, it's not theory. It's pattern recognition. So when January arrives and you stack change on top of an already overloaded life, the outcome's almost guaranteed. Not because you're weak, because the strategy doesn't match the environment. McKeown says it very simply. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And when you're a caregiver, everyone wants a piece of you. Your job, your family, the system, the person and people you care for. So you say yes, not because you want to necessarily, but because it feels required. The problem's not laziness, it's diffusion. Your energy spreads thin, your time dissolves into everybody else's needs. By March of the year kind of feels the same, just like last year. There was a season in my own life after years of taking care of others when everything looked fine on paper. I was reliable, I was high functioning, I was capable. But one night, close to midnight, I was sitting at the table pushing through a list that never ended. I was answering to everyone, but I wasn't checking in with myself. No big collapse, just a quiet realization my life was drifting away from me. Good intentions don't survive without protection. And if this year is going to be any different, it won't be because you try harder. It'll be because you actually simplify. So caregivers live among competing urgencies. Your priorities are constantly overwritten by the next request, the next crisis, the next person who needs you more urgently than you need yourself. Over time, your worth gets tied to usefulness, availability, and endurance. In medicine, in nursing, in parenting, in home caregiving. Shouldering becomes the job. But shouldering doesn't really heal you. It just keeps you in survival mode. You can't shoulder your way into peace. You can't say yes to everything without slowly saying no to yourself. And this is why the one thing matters. Author Gary Keller asks, what's the one thing you or I can do that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? Not everything you could do. The one thing that creates leverage. Because success isn't simultaneous, it's actually sequential. You don't need discipline everywhere. You need it where it matters the most. So pause for a moment. If one thing changed this year, what would make everything else a little bit easier? You don't need the perfect answer, but just notice what comes up and write it down. Take a pause here and write it down on a piece of paper. Caregivers get trapped by 3 lies. Everything matters equally, multitasking works, and discipline means doing it all. Well, guess what? None of those are true. It's better focus that creates relief. Small changes, when protected, actually create structure, and structure creates capacity. Most caregivers aren't missing discipline. They're missing focus. So if this year is going to feel different, it has to be built differently. Ask yourself, what's the one thing I can do this month, this week, that makes my life easier, healthier, and more mine? For caregivers, it usually lives in one place. Energy, boundaries, emotional regulation, time. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to work for you. So let's break it down into 3 steps. Step 1 is shrink it. Author James Clear says habits that rely on motivation fail. Habits that survive exhaustion actually endure. If it can't survive a bad day, the habit's just too big. 2 minutes beats nothing. Taking 5 breaths beats nothing. Writing 1 sentence beats a blank page. During a hard season, my habit was simple. Before checking my phone, I sat on the edge of my bed and took 3 slow breaths. And waking up in the morning, and that was it. Didn't change my life overnight, but it changed my identity. I was no longer that I'm trying to reset. I was I'm someone who resets. Remember that identity follows repetition. In step 2, use essential no's. Sometimes the one thing isn't something you add, but it's actually something you stop doing. If it isn't a clear yes, then it's a no. Every yes to something non-essential is a no to something essential, and we need to figure it out. So 1 boundary can return more energy than 10 new habits, so be careful. When I finally set mine, nothing collapsed. What showed up instead was some relief. Finally, in step 3, attach the habit that you want to change to a cue. Habits stick when they're anchored to cues, like brewing your coffee in the morning, brushing your teeth, or arriving home at the end of the day. Same cue every day, but maybe a new and more productive and different response. You're not fighting your brain, you're actually designing for it. Caregivers don't need more discipline. They need fewer competing priorities. And this year, just choose one thing. 1 habit that protects your energy, 1 boundary that restores your time, or 1 practice that reminds you your life still belongs to you. Progress compounds quietly. Every 2 minutes you protect tells your nervous system, I still exist. When I look back, the moments that mattered weren't dramatic. They were small, but they were repeated and defended. Starting now still counts. If today's episode resonated, the books we're referencing are linked in the show notes. They're Essentialism by Greg McKeown, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and The One Thing by Gary Keller. If I'd have to recommend what order to tackle them in, because you can't just buy all 4, I would suggest going with The One Thing and Essentialism first, then tapping into Atomic Habits and The Power of Habit. So my prescription for 2026 for you is just 3 things. And once you get good at it, you can repeat this pattern. Name 1 energy drain you'll reduce this month. Choose 1 habit and shrink it down to 2 minutes. And write your 1 thing down and put it somewhere visible. And just read it every day. Start today, practice it tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day. Not because it's easy, but because it compounds. I'm Dr. Mark. You take care of yourself because you're worth it, and you're not alone. Happy New Year. Before we wrap up, I wanted to remind you of something important. The conversations you hear on this podcast are here to inform, to support, to spark reflection. They're not a substitute for professional medical advice, care, therapy, or crisis services. Listening to this podcast does not create a doctor-patient or caregiver-client relationship between us. If you're facing a medical concern, health challenge, a mental health challenge, or a caregiving situation that needs guidance, I encourage you to reach out to a qualified professional who knows your story. If you're ever in crisis, please don't wait. Call your local emergency number or recognize crisis hotline right away. You deserve real-time help and support. The views you hear on this show, whether from me or my guests, are our own. They don't necessarily reflect any organizations we work with or are part of or have worked with or been part of in the past. This podcast is an independent production. It's not tied to any hospital, university, or healthcare system. Thank you for being here, for listening, and most of all, for taking the time to care for yourself while you continue to care for others. I look forward to hearing from you.